kind of interesting, and I'm not sure if you picked up on this, but in recent years, very recent years, as in the last 2 years, there has been a wellspring of a type of interest in the plight, if you will, of men and boys. People talk about it a lot more than they used to. 10, 12 years ago, when a lot of us, myself included, Barbarossa, were talking about this a lot, mum was the word, and there was basically no discussion in the mainstream. Now you will get a number of personages talking about these things every now and then. Chad Williams, one of them. And you get certain authors, like this guy Richard Reeves, who wrote this book of Boys and Men. And recently Chad Williamson got a guy on called George the Tin Men, with the title, Why Do the Left Not Care About Men's Problems? Indeed, so there's been this upsurge of seeming, quote-unquote, interest in the plight and affairs of men and boys. But the real question, as I always like to ask, is, does it really matter? A lot of information that used to be commonplace in the manosphere, that has been talked about for a very long time, the empathy gap. All this ultimately stems from the empathy gap, as you're well aware. This was very well documented, as I said, by others. Barbarossa, way back in the day, was probably the first person online to regularly talk about it in a powerful and convincing manner. And over the years, I've tried to make my contributions to that too. But if you look at the quote-unquote men's movement of the past, MRAs, this sort of thing, almost all of them were regarded as freaks, and almost all the rhetoric fell on deaf ears. Well, fair enough, different era, different time. Can't really blame people for that. And these new guys aren't really MRAs, men's rights activists, but they're trying to make the case for men and boys, especially a guy like Richard Reeves of Boys and Men. He wrote this book. He's appeared on a number of podcasts. He's been online. He's been in the news. But I don't think anything's going to change. I hate to be the Debbie Downer, the negative Nancy. But to quote Phil Collins, this is the world we live in, and these are the hands we're given. You notice with all these guys, with their so-called advocacy for men and boys, they preface everything they say with women are really important. We can't forget about women. We're not trying to diss women. We're not trying to dismiss women. We're not trying to make women lose anything. I don't view it as a zero-sum game. If men win, then women lose. So a lot of caveats, a lot of pretexts, a lot of this and that. And I don't blame them. They kind of have to say that sort of thing, especially if they're operating in the mainstream. Fundamentally, these people don't understand something. No one has ever really cared about men. That is the lot of being a man. All this ultimately, if you want to be very reductionistic about it, goes back to the simple equation of sperm are cheap and eggs are expensive. Women are a more valuable reproductive asset for the continuation of a species than are men. The famous scenario of you have a village where 99% of the women get wiped out and most of the men are around. Well, the village is kind of screwed. However, if 99% of the men get wiped out, but most of the women are around, well, that guy's going to be pretty happy, to say the least. Although he might be stressed out as well. Yes, he would be stressed out. And so civilization is an outcropping of that. Civilization is a derivation of that. We look out for the welfare of women. We care more about women. That's all derivative of all of that. The infamous or famous axiom of women and children first when the Titanic is sinking. I could go on, but you obviously know what I'm talking about. So that is just the state of affairs. Now, the reason why in earlier times, say the earlier mid-20th century, people still nominally, ostensibly, cared about the needs, wants, desires of men was because of the perception that their labor was an absolute necessity, which is still the case to this day, mind you, but is very much out in the open. If you want civilization to keep on chugging along, you needed men, and therefore you couldn't neglect men. You had to support them in their endeavors. You had to make sure that they didn't fall by the wayside, because every man who did fall by the wayside would not be able to contribute. So even 70, 60 years ago, the seeming concern for men was not really concern so much as a pragmatic recognition that, yeah, we need these guys and therefore we can't really neglect them. These days, through the mechanization effect, through technology, we've come to live in a world that's veiled. We don't see the intricate workings of what's going on anymore. So we don't see the telephone pole workers anymore. We don't see the sewage treatment plant workers. And as concerns the visible men out there, like garbage men, etc., we just take them for granted. It's very easy in today's world to cover all the important contributions of men up. It was much harder in a former time. So sure, as I've already stated, that did not come from a concern for men. That came from a concern for the practical necessity of supporting a population that needs to do certain things to keep civilization chugging along, to maintain the modern world as we know it. Now, as everything has become veiled and we just don't know what's going on and people don't pay attention to the nitty-gritty details, the cogs, as it were, and men are absolutely required to maintain these cogs, as I've stated here and in many, many videos, it's almost impossible for many people, especially women, to conceive the idea that men are necessary. That to neglect men, and especially boys as they're growing up, is to, in part, create a generation of ne'er-do-wells, potentially. However you want to define ne'er-do-well here. Because ultimately that's all that people really care about when it comes to men. Be useful. Do something productive. No one is ever going to care about men. It's just not the reality we inhabit. These big shots out there, whether they're podcasters, multimillionaires, whatever, yeah, they're in the spotlight because they're important because they did stuff. Remember what they say. Men are human doings and women are human beings. It's always been that way and it always will be that way. If you're really lucky, you might have a family that cares about you. And because you're genetically related to them as a man, they will give a damn about you. Maybe. And if you're even luckier, you might have a friend group of males that view you in the sense of brotherhood and actually care about your well-being and look out for you. That's also possible. But the greater world out there, forget about it. Women, forget about it. Women will look at you in the sense of you're attractive and useful, so there you go. They'll pair up with you. Your underlying humanity, broadly speaking, will not be acknowledged. And I challenge anyone to contest that view. People would accuse me in this case of making generalizations and painting a picture with too broad a brush. Sorry, though, look at the world that we exist in. Does it look like people, women, or otherwise care about men's well-being? No. Men need to fix themselves, they need to get their act in order, blah, blah, blah. Women suffer, we need to help women. That's how it is. Unless you change human beings at the genetic level, and therefore at the level of psychology, the level of the brain, any attempt to help men en masse is always going to fail. Men are en masse invisible. Men as individuals are invisible unless they're doing something important. And the second they stop doing something important, they're invisible again. How are you going to get people to care about that? Absolutely impossible. Now, given all of this, I thought it would be fitting to end the video with some wise words from the late, great Barbarossa. By late, great, I mean he hasn't been on YouTube for a very long time and he retired. But nonetheless, some of his videos from the past are prescient. And I think this snippet from this old school video of his is very telling and very on point.
It's the cold hard reality that men need to face and address. You will find no solace in the bosom of a woman, I assure you. Now, you see, it's time for men to stand up and look around them and see that it is a very cold place and you're the only one that can pull yourself out of that frigid abyss. You. There is no mommy coming to save you, men. There is no mommy to make you feel safe. And as a matter of fact, women despise men that show any weakness because they want to be taken care of. That's right, they despise you for wanting the same things that they demand from men. Security, protection, reassurance, etc. These things a man must earn by overcoming insecurity and danger in order to earn self-assurance, which women apparently respond to. So that still just boils down to one fundamental truth in regards to the society. Men, you are alone in the eyes of this society, and the only ones that will be rewarded are the ones that perform and perform well according to society's standards. If you think for a second that in this society your inherent personhood as a man matters, you are sorely mistaken. This society just does not care, and there exists a very real power in knowing exactly where one stands as a man, no matter how desolate and isolated the situation is.
And beyond that, everyone, thank you for tuning in. As always, special thanks to my patrons. You guys are the best, as well as all donors on PayPal. You keep your channel going. Without your support, the channel probably wouldn't exist. And if you can engage in the usual YouTube jazz of liking the video, sharing it, subscribing, leaving a comment, always helps, although I am shadow banned, the algorithm hates me. And if I'm still alive, I will check you out next time. Take care. May the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.